Captain Elia's corps stepped off the human transport ship and onto the polished floor of the Scifi citadel. The air inside the massive palace was cool and clean, carrying a faint hum of alien machinery, unlike anything he had ever felt on Earth. Everywhere he looked, tall, angular structures rose like metal trees, glinting in a pale blue light. For a man used to crowded cities and clanging steel, this place felt impossibly vast and silent, as if the walls themselves were alive and watching. He had been chosen for this mission because humanity needed a representative, a warrior, and someone clever enough to survive whatever test the alien Queen Seraphine had in mind. And yet, standing there in his standard Earth uniform, Elias felt exposed and small. Across the great hall, figures moved with strange grace, tall Scifi soldiers, covered in sleek armor that shimmered like oil on water. Their heads were elongated, with eyes that seemed to see everything at once. They spoke in clicks and whistles, a language that seemed musical yet precise, incomprehensible to human ears. "Welcome, human," a voice said from above. Elias looked up to see Queen Seraphine seated on a throne carved from what looked like crystal and black stone. She was taller than any human he had ever seen, with a regal bearing that made the soldiers around her seem like children in comparison. Her eyes glowed softly, a shade of violet that made him feel like she could see his very thoughts. "You have been chosen for a test," she continued, her voice echoing in the hall in a way that made every word feel heavier than normal sound. "A test not of strength, but of value. You will begin by sweeping the floors of this palace." It looked almost ceremonial, not like a cleaning tool. Elias took it reluctantly, feeling a mix of indignation and confusion. He had fought in wars, faced harsh deserts, and trained in ways most people could not imagine. And now his first task with one of the most powerful species in the galaxy was sweeping floors. He lowered his head and obeyed. The brush swept against the smooth stone, and the sound echoed softly through the hall. The palace was enormous, and dust, as fine as powder, clung to the corners of the floor and the edges of the walls. At first he moved mechanically, thinking about how absurd it was. But then he noticed the little details. The way the light reflected off the walls, the faint markings etched into the floor, patterns that repeated in a sequence almost like a language. He began to move more carefully, letting his eyes catch every line and curve. Hours passed. He swept, pushed, and polished, the brush whispering against the stone. The Scifi soldiers watched silently, never commenting, never laughing. Occasionally, one of the young warriors would approach to correct a movement or show a better way, but they did it with patience, never with malice. Elias began to see that even in this menial task, there was a rhythm, a pattern, and perhaps a lesson. By the end of the day, his arms ached, his back protested, and the floor gleamed. He stepped back to examine his work. The hall looked perfect, as if the palace itself had been reborn under his hands. Yet in all honesty, he still felt like a fool. Queen Seraphine rose from her throne. Her gaze swept over him, calm and precise. "You are dismissed for today," she said. "Tomorrow, the real test begins." The palace was quiet, but not silent. He could hear the soft hum of machinery deep within the walls, a constant reminder that he was far from home. He thought about the brush in his hand, the slow, rhythmic movement, and he realized he had been watching the soldiers as closely as the floor. He had noticed how they moved in formation, how each step was precise, how even a small gesture could reveal intent. He had learned more about the Scifi in one day of sweeping than he could have by speaking with 100 ambassadors. Elias' mind raced. Perhaps the Queen had intended this. Perhaps the test was not the act itself, but what he would learn while performing it. His human instincts, curiosity, observation, and problem-solving were the tools he had brought into this alien world, and perhaps they were exactly what the Queen wanted to see. The next morning he returned to the hall. The floor was already spotless, the sunlight through the high windows casting long patterns across the polished stone. Queen Seraphine watched from her throne. Today she did not speak. Instead, she gestured toward a group of Scifi soldiers who were practicing combat routines. Their movements were elegant, almost like a dance, but precise and deadly. "You will join them," the Queen said, "but not as a warrior yet. Observe." The soldiers moved in complex sequences, their weapons flashing in patterns that seemed impossible to follow. Yet he noticed something. Between the movements there were tiny pauses, subtle shifts in stance, moments when a Scifi's weight shifted before a strike, small clues that revealed their next action. He studied each movement carefully, mentally marking patterns. It reminded him of sweeping the floors, The repetition, the rhythm, the small details that were easy to miss if one rushed. The lesson of patience was clear. As he observed, a young Sci-fi warrior approached him. Unlike the others, he spoke in clicks and whistles slowly enough for Elias to mimic. The warrior pointed to a sequence and challenged Elias to replicate it with his own body. At first, it felt awkward. His human muscles were not used to the alien form and movements. But he tried, focusing on balance, timing, and flow rather than strength. To his own surprise, he succeeded. The warrior gave a faint nod, a gesture of respect in Sci-fi culture before returning to the formation. Elias felt a small thrill. He realized that humans, even without alien strength or training, could adapt quickly, notice things others missed, and apply their minds in new ways. After hours of observation and practice, he returned to sweeping. The act felt different now. The brush in his hand was no longer just a cleaning tool, it was a way to train focus, patience, and awareness. He noticed the tiniest dust particles, the smallest smudges, and polished them with care. With each stroke, he felt himself preparing for something larger, something the queen had planned but had not yet revealed. By evening, he was exhausted, but there was a quiet satisfaction in his work. The palace gleamed, and somewhere in the shadows, he felt the queen's gaze. He could not see her smile, but he imagined it there, approving the patience and diligence he had shown. As he walked back to his chamber, Elias thought about what he had learned. A test was not always what it seemed. Humility, observation, and perseverance were not weaknesses, they were tools that humans had in abundance, even when compared to the strongest species in the galaxy. He allowed himself a small, confident smile. Perhaps, just perhaps, he was beginning to understand why the queen had chosen him. That night he slept deeply, his dreams filled with patterns, movements, and the faint hum of the palace. He dreamed of battlefields and strategies, of humans and aliens working together, and of a future where his species might prove itself not through brute force alone, but through ingenuity, courage, and the quiet strength of persistence. By the time the sun, or what passed for sunlight in the Sci-fi citadel, rose the next morning, Captain Elias' corps was ready. The brush in his hand felt lighter, and the floor beneath his feet felt like the foundation of something far greater than himself. He knew that tomorrow, when the queen finally revealed the real test, he would be ready, not just to sweep floors, but to sweep the battlefield itself. And in that quiet, unassuming moment, humanity had already begun to make its mark on the galaxy. The next morning, Captain Elias' corps woke before the first faint hum of the Sci-fi palace. The shadows in his chamber stretched long across the floor, and the air still carried the scent of metal and ozone from the previous day's sweeping. He dressed quickly and left, carrying the brush with him, not as a tool for cleaning, but as a symbol of the lessons he had already learned. Every detail, every pattern, every silent rhythm mattered in this place. The Queen's Hall was already filled with activity when he arrived. Sci-fi soldiers moved with purpose, arranging themselves in formations that twisted and turned with fluid grace. Each soldier seemed aware of the others, communicating through tiny gestures, clicks, and shifts that were impossible for a human to understand fully. Yet Elias could see the logic behind them. The queen watched him from her throne as always, her glowing eyes calm, almost teasing. She made no motion to address him, yet the quiet was more commanding than any words could have been. Elias stepped forward, feeling the weight of observation pressing on him. Today he thought would be different. "You observed well yesterday," a voice said beside him, a young Sci-fi warrior speaking slowly, making the clicks and whistles easier for Elias to imitate. His name, Elias had learned, was Turak. "You see patterns others miss. That is rare." "I learned by watching," he said simply. "Small details matter." Today, Elias would not sweep floors. Instead, he would watch combat drills unlike any humans had ever seen. The Sci-fi moved as if they were part of the same organism, striking, deflecting, retreating, and advancing with terrifying speed and precision. At first, Elias felt overwhelmed. His eyes darted back and forth, trying to follow every move, every weapon flash. But then he remembered the lessons of the floor. He slowed his breathing and let his mind notice patterns rather than trying to react immediately. He saw the subtle shifts in weight before an attack, the way soldiers adjusted their stance to prepare for defense, the small steps that led to decisive movements. Hours passed, and Elias remained in the arena observing. His human mind, untrained in Sci-fi fighting but trained in adaptation and analysis, began to notice strategies that were invisible to the alien eye. He noticed how formations could be disrupted by misdirection, how an enemy's strength could be neutralized by timing and position. At one point, Turak motioned for Elias to step forward. "Show me what you see," he said. "Predict the movement before it happens." He sidestepped at the perfect moment, using the momentum of the attack to move past the soldier and tap him lightly on the shoulder, a gesture the Scifer used to signify a successful touch without harm. Turek tilted his head. "Interesting," he said. "You do not rely on strength, you use prediction and observation. Understanding is harder." It became clear that the Queen's test was not about brute force, nor even about traditional skill. It was about using the human mind to see what others overlooked. During a brief break, Elias studied the palace from the practice arena. The walls, with their etched patterns and subtle energy conduits, seemed to hum with life. He realized that his sweeping the floors had trained him to notice tiny imperfections, hidden patterns, and subtle rhythms. Every corner of the palace had a story, and every story revealed strategy and logic. Later, Turek approached him again. "The Queen watches more than your actions," he said quietly. "She watches your mind. She tests patience as much as skill. How you think is more important than how you fight." He was placed in a simulation chamber where holographic enemies attacked in unpredictable ways. Unlike the structured drills he had observed, this environment was chaotic, with multiple attackers, shifting terrain, and energy fields that altered movement. Elias took a deep breath. He began by analyzing the layout, then observed the holograms' patterns. At first, he was nearly overwhelmed, forced to dodge attacks and adjust constantly. But he noticed the small delays, the repeated sequences hidden within the chaos. Using this insight, he began turning the chaos into opportunity. He moved efficiently, sidestepping attacks, using the holographic terrain for cover, and even tricking some projections into colliding with each other. By the end of the exercise, the chamber was silent. Elias stood amidst the dissipating holograms, breathing heavily but triumphant. Turek watched him with what Elias interpreted as genuine respect. "You are learning the ways of the Queen," he said. "Not through strength, but through mind and observation. Few humans could survive this." "We learn, we survive." He understood now that the Queen's first test was not meant to humiliate him, but to teach him to see the world differently. That evening, the Queen summoned him to a private chamber. The room was dimly lit, and her presence felt heavier than usual. She did not speak immediately. She studied him, her violet eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. "You are unlike other humans," she finally said. "You do not rush. You do not rely on strength alone. You observe, you calculate, you adapt. That is why you have passed the first stage of my test. Only humans can combine intuition and calculation in ways my species rarely does. You must be ready to lead, or you will fail." He returned to his chamber that night with a renewed sense of purpose. He practiced moves he had seen in the arena, visualizing combat scenarios in his mind. He replayed the patterns, the timing, the small details that gave him an edge. He realized that what the Queen valued most was not muscle, not armor, not technology, but the mind that could see what others could not. As he drifted into sleep, Elias imagined the battlefield that awaited him. He saw humans and Scifer standing side by side, facing enemies that would think them inferior. And yet, he knew that with patience, observation, and adaptability, they could overcome anything. The simple act of sweeping floors had taught him discipline. Observing drills had taught him prediction. Combining the two would teach him strategy. By dawn, he was ready. The palace corridors no longer felt vast and intimidating. Every corner, every etched wall, every faint hum of the machinery was familiar, and each detail offered insight into how he could survive and excel. He understood now that the Queen's methods were harsh, yes, but brilliant. She had created a test that used human strengths against alien weaknesses, and Elias intended to prove that humanity's mind could shine in even the most alien environment. When he entered the hall that morning, the Queen's eyes held a faint trace of approval. Elias held his head high. Today, he would not just observe. Today, he would show what humans could do when they combined curiosity, intelligence, and courage. And somewhere deep inside, he smiled. Sweeping floors had been only the beginning. The battlefield awaited, and he was ready. The arena was unlike anything Elias' core had ever seen. It stretched endlessly, a vast expanse of polished metal and shifting holographic terrain, designed to test not just strength, but perception, patience, and intelligence. Towers and walls appeared and vanished in seconds, platforms rose and fell without warning, and holographic enemies spawned from every direction. The Queen had said this would be his first real battle. Elias could feel the weight of that statement in every fiber of his being. Beside him, Turek stood silently, his posture relaxed but alert. The young Zephyr warrior had grown to respect Elias, though he still treated him as a student, not an equal. "Do not fight as you would with humans," Turek said softly, his clicks deliberate and careful. "Observe first, then act. The mind is more important than the body here." They were humanoid, armored, and fast, moving with precision that would have overwhelmed any unprepared human. But Elias did not panic. He remembered the lessons of sweeping floors and observing drills. Small details mattered. The enemy's attacks had a rhythm, even if it was complex. There were pauses between strikes, moments when their balance shifted, tiny delays that an untrained eye would miss. Elias watched carefully, letting his body react only when necessary. A holographic soldier lunged toward him. Elias sidestepped, using the momentum to pivot behind the projection. Another attacker came from the left. He ducked, rolling across the floor, and tapped the hologram lightly on the shoulder, the simulation registering the hit without actual damage. Each movement was calculated, efficient, conserving energy while taking advantage of the environment. The queen watched from above, her violet eyes glowing faintly, unmoved but intensely focused. Elias knew she was judging not just his skill, but his approach. Did he rely on brute strength, or did he think, adapt, and use intelligence to overcome obstacles? The arena shifted again. Platforms rose and fell unpredictably, forcing Elias to adjust constantly. Holographic projectiles flew from walls and ceiling, and the floor itself shifted beneath his feet. He could have panicked, but instead he used observation to find patterns. Certain projectiles repeated sequences, the platforms followed hidden timing, and enemies' attacks had a subtle delay after each strike. By watching closely, he began to predict the chaos before it happened. Minutes stretched into hours. Elias moved tirelessly, dodging, rolling, and striking with precision. Sweat ran down his forehead, his muscles ached, but his mind remained sharp. Each movement became a rhythm, each observation a tool. He realized that the floor-sweeping lessons, attention to detail, patience, observing subtle changes, had prepared him perfectly for this. Suddenly, a group of holographic warriors surrounded him. Their attacks were faster and more coordinated than anything he had faced before. Elias' heart pounded, but he remained calm. He noticed a small detail. One of the platforms beneath them was unstable. He lured a soldier onto it, using the platform's instability to knock the hologram aside. Another followed. Step by step, he turned the environment against them, using strategy instead of strength. Turek watched with fascination. "You do not fight like us," he said quietly. "You fight like a human, unpredictable, resourceful, clever." Holographic enemies worked in sequences, moving in formations that repeated after every third cycle. He used this knowledge to anticipate their actions, striking at the right moment and avoiding unnecessary risks. Slowly, he began to control the battlefield, not with raw power, but with foresight and calculation. At one point, the arena shifted completely. A massive wall rose, dividing the field, and new holographic warriors appeared on the other side. Elias paused, observing the new formations. His mind worked quickly, calculating angles, predicting attacks, and identifying weaknesses. He moved with precision, luring enemies into traps created by the shifting terrain itself. Each strike was efficient, each movement purposeful. By the end of the exercise, Elias had defeated the holographic army. He was exhausted, his clothes damp with sweat, his muscles screaming from fatigue, but a deep satisfaction filled him. He had succeeded not because he was stronger or faster than the Zephyr, but because he had used the one advantage humans always had, their minds. Turek approached, nodding slightly. "The Queen will be pleased," he said. "You have proven that humans can match Zephyr in ways we did not expect. Strength is easy to measure, but your mind, it is formidable." He felt the exhaustion of the day, but his mind raced with analysis. Every movement, every decision in the arena was a lesson. He realized that the Queen's tests were not meant to challenge only the body. They were meant to train the mind to see opportunity in chaos. The same patterns that governed the palace, the drills, and even the floor sweeping were present in combat. Humans by nature could see them differently, and that difference could turn the tide in any battle. The next morning, Elias was summoned to a private chamber by the Queen herself. She sat on her throne, her violet eyes glowing with a faint light. There was no ceremony, no fanfare, just her presence commanding attention. "You have done well," she said, her voice soft but resonant. "Few humans could succeed where you have. You do not rely on strength alone. You observe, adapt, and act with foresight. That is why you have passed the simulation stage." The lessons you have learned, observation, patience, adaptation, will be tested against warriors who are stronger, faster, and more experienced than you could imagine. Are you ready? He trained his mind as rigorously as his body, visualizing sequences, anticipating attacks, and creating strategies that combined human ingenuity with Sci-fi logic. He understood now that this test was about thinking differently, using his mind as a weapon where strength alone would fail. When morning came, Elias entered the hall once more. The Sci-fi soldiers were assembled, their weapons gleaming, their movements precise and silent. The arena was alive with tension. He could feel the eyes of the queen upon him, watching, judging, expecting. The first wave of combatants approached, moving with deadly precision. Elias did not falter. He moved with calm, measured steps, anticipating their attacks, using the environment and his knowledge of patterns to his advantage. He rolled under strikes, tapped opponents in ways that registered as hits without risking himself, and used terrain to create obstacles for the faster Sci-fi warriors. He was not just fighting. He was thinking, observing, predicting, and adapting in real time. Every movement he made was calculated, every decision deliberate. The battle continued for hours. Elias' body ached, his muscles burned, but his mind was clear. He began to notice even subtle behaviors in the Sci-fi fighters, the slight hesitation before an attack, the repeated gestures that hinted at intention. Using this, he started turning the tide, luring the warriors into positions where their strength and speed counted for less. By the end of the day, Elias had defeated every opponent in the arena. He stood alone, breathing heavily, sweat and dirt streaking his face. Turek approached, his expression one of quiet admiration. "You have done what few could. You have turned your weakness into strength, your mind into the greatest weapon." Humans, with their creativity, adaptability, and intelligence, could face challenges no other species could. The arena had proven it. And in that quiet moment, amidst the stillness of the palace hall, Elias realized something profound. The true test was only beginning. The battlefield would come, not as a simulation, but as reality. And when it did, humans would have to prove that their minds and courage could overcome even the strongest adversaries in the galaxy. But Elias was ready. He had learned the value of observation, patience, and adaptability. He had seen the patterns in chaos and learned to use them. He had discovered the power of human ingenuity in a world dominated by strength and precision. Tomorrow, he would face warriors of flesh and blood, and he would show the alien queen and the galaxy that humans were a force to be reckoned with. The day dawned with an electric tension in the Sci-fi citadel. Outside, the sky glowed faintly with the light of distant suns, casting a pale reflection across the polished metal towers. Captain Elias Corps stood at the edge of the command platform, looking out over a battlefield that stretched beyond the horizon. This was not a simulation. This was real. The Queen had summoned him with a single order: lead a joint force of humans and Sci-fi warriors against a hostile alien species known as the Kryn, a ruthless and powerful race whose advance threatened entire systems. The Kryn were stronger, faster, and heavily armed. They had conquered several nearby worlds, leaving destruction in their wake. Humanity's alliance with the Sci-fi rested on this battle. Failure was not an option. Elias took a deep breath. He felt the weight of responsibility, not just for the humans under his command, but for every life on this battlefield. His mind raced, recalling everything he had learned in the palace: patience, observation, adaptation, and the small details that could make the difference between victory and annihilation. "Captain Corps," Turek said quietly, stepping beside him, "your people are ready. My warriors follow your orders. We trust you." "Then let's make sure they survive." The combined force was ready, yet the Kryn were unpredictable. "Listen carefully," Elias said, addressing both humans and Sci-fi. "The Kryn are strong, fast, and intelligent. We can't match them in brute force, but we can outthink them, watch each other, watch the enemy, anticipate moves, not just react. Humans, use your creativity. Sci-fi, use your discipline. Together, we will make them underestimate us, and that will be our advantage." Their ships cut across the sky, landing troops and machines with a precision that made even the Sci-fi soldiers tense. The aliens emerged, towering, muscular, with armored plating that glinted like black ice. Their weapons discharged in energy pulses, powerful and precise. Elias felt the familiar adrenaline surge. This was what he had trained for. This was the moment where the lessons of sweeping floors, observing patterns, and surviving simulations would be tested in life-and-death combat. The battle began. The Kryn charged with terrifying speed. Elias had positioned humans and Scifi together, placing the faster, more flexible human soldiers in flanking positions while Scifi formed the core of the line. Elias moved along the front, observing enemy patterns. Just as in the arena, the Kryn attacks followed a rhythm and their overconfidence became apparent. A Kryn warrior lunged at a Scifi soldier. Elias noticed the slight delay in its footwork, the small hesitation before swinging its weapon. He shouted, "Right flank." Now, humans on the flank surged forward, taking advantage of the momentary lapse. The Scifi soldier blocked the blow, maintaining formation. Within seconds, the Kryn were momentarily disoriented. "Good," Turak called, clicking in approval. "You see what they do not see. Make them fight our way, not theirs." Every small decision mattered. Every detail Elias had learned in the palace became critical in this battlefield. At one point, a group of Kryn advanced toward the human flank, faster than expected. Elias ran to the position, signaling human soldiers to form a wedge. "Don't fight them head-on, use the terrain," he pointed to a ridge nearby. "Lure them here." "Good work," Turak shouted, moving alongside Elias. "Your planning saves lives today." "Use misdirection," he commanded. "Form a false retreat, let them follow." The humans fell back as ordered, and the Kryn advanced, confident in their apparent advantage. Then Elias triggered a hidden energy trap he had discovered in the terrain, a collapsed bridge over a deep ravine. The Kryn fell into it, their machines crashing and scattering. Chaos erupted among their ranks. Elias' forces surged forward, taking advantage of the confusion. Human creativity and Scifi discipline worked in tandem, and slowly the tide turned. Every decision Elias made relied on strategy, observation, and adaptability, not raw strength. As the battle continued, he noticed a group of Kryn attempting to flank the Scifi core. Elias acted without hesitation. "Turak, take your squad and intercept them from the left. Human archers cover from above." Within moments, the flank was neutralized, and the enemy was forced back into the main line. Hours stretched on, and Elias' body ached, but his mind remained sharp. He coordinated attacks, watched for patterns, and adjusted strategies in real time. Humans and Scifi began to move as one force, learning from each other, relying on Elias' guidance. The Queen's test had prepared him for this moment. The combination of observation, patience, and strategy allowed a single human to guide an entire army. Finally, as the sun, or what passed for sunlight over the alien horizon, began to fade, the Kryn forces faltered. Their energy reserves were low, their formations broken, and morale shattered. Elias pressed the advantage, directing humans and Scifi to push forward with precision. With a final coordinated strike, the Kryn retreated, fleeing toward their ships. Elias watched them go, exhausted but victorious. The battlefield was quiet except for the hum of machinery and the distant calls of his soldiers. Human and Scifi alike turned to him, their faces a mixture of relief, respect, and awe. Turak approached, his clicks slow but deliberate. "You have done it. You have turned humans and Scifi into one force, and you have defeated a powerful enemy. Few could have done what you did today." He looked around at the soldiers, the wounded, the exhausted, and felt a surge of pride. Humans were small, yes, and fragile, but their minds, creative, adaptable, determined, could turn even impossible odds into victory. That evening, the Queen summoned Elias to her throne. He approached with steady steps, aware of the significance of the moment. She studied him in silence, her violet eyes gleaming in the dim light. "You have exceeded my expectations," she said finally. "Few species could lead my warriors and achieve victory against the Kryn, but you did. Not through strength, not through speed, but through strategy, observation, and courage. That is why humans are worthy allies in this galaxy." "It was not just me, Your Majesty. Humans and Scifi fought together. We learned from each other. We survived together. You have passed the ultimate test of leadership." The Queen had designed the test to find someone who could see beyond instinct, someone who could lead not just through orders, but through understanding. Elias had passed that test. As he left the throne room that night, the palace seemed different. The walls no longer felt imposing. They felt like allies, silent witnesses to the potential of human ingenuity. The lessons of sweeping floors, observing drills, and surviving simulations had all led to this moment. Humans, he realized, were not just survivors. They were strategists, innovators, and leaders in a universe that often underestimated them. Elias stood on a balcony, looking out at the battlefield below. Fires had been extinguished, bodies counted, and the survivors tended. The Kryn threat had been repelled, but the memory of their strength lingered. Elias knew that more challenges would come, more battles where humans would need to prove themselves, yet he felt ready. He had learned that strength alone did not guarantee survival. Observation, strategy, and unity did, and for the first time he understood the full meaning of the Queen's test. It was never about cleaning floors, surviving drills, or even winning a simulated battle. It was about preparing a human mind to lead where others would fail, to turn ingenuity and courage into victory, and to show the galaxy that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. Tomorrow, new battles would come. New enemies would challenge him and his forces. But Elias Core, captain of humanity, would face them with the same determination, creativity, and courage that had carried him through the arena, through observation, and now through the battlefield itself. Humans had proven their worth, and the galaxy would not forget it. The victory over the Kryn had sent ripples across the galaxy. Elias Core stood on the balcony of the Sci-fi Citadel, watching the pale sun rise over the horizon. Fires from the battlefield were extinguished, but the smoke and ash still lingered faintly, a reminder of the chaos that had threatened countless worlds. Humans and Sci-fi alike were busy tending the wounded, repairing machines, and fortifying defenses. The alliance he had forged in battle was now real, tangible, and stronger than any ceremony could make it. Elias allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He remembered the first day in the Queen's Hall, holding a brush and sweeping the floors. How foolish he had felt, how small. And yet that simple task had begun a transformation, one that had led him to this moment, standing at the center of a galaxy that was beginning to see humanity in a new light. He turned as Turak approached. The young Sci-fi warrior had changed too, respect and trust shone in his violet eyes. "The Queen will see you now," he said. "It is time to be honored." He followed Turak through the grand corridors, every step echoing against the walls carved with alien runes. The palace felt alive, each corner humming with energy as if it acknowledged his presence. He knew that today was not just a recognition of personal achievement, it was a moment for humanity itself. The throne room was immense, brighter than Elias had ever seen it. Queen Seraphine sat on her crystal-black throne, surrounded by her council of elite Sci-fi warriors. The room seemed to pulse with her presence, and Elias felt the weight of her gaze before he even approached. "You have returned," she said, her voice calm yet resonant. "The battlefield reports are favorable. Your forces were strong, and humanity's adaptability and strategies complemented them. That is why you have passed the test I set for you. You saw patterns that others missed. You used your mind when others relied on instinct. You proved humanity has value beyond what many would believe." Yet in the crucible of this test, and in the heat of the battlefield, they had shown that strength alone does not determine the outcome. Ingenuity, courage, and determination do. The Queen gestured, and her council stepped back. "Rise, Captain Elias Core. You are no longer merely a representative of your species. You are a leader, a strategist, and a symbol of what humanity can achieve. Let the galaxy remember that humans can adapt, endure, and triumph where others might fail." "Your Majesty," he said, his voice steady, "I accept this not for myself, but for humanity. Every human who fought, survived, and adapted alongside Sci-fi contributed to this victory. We are stronger together than divided, and we will continue to prove that humans are not just survivors. We are thinkers, innovators, and fighters in our own right. You speak as a leader, not a soldier, and yet the battlefield will always test those who lead. You have passed this stage, but challenges will continue. Your mind, your creativity, and your courage will be the keys to survival for both species. We will rise to any challenge." He remembered the Kryn, their overwhelming strength and speed, and how humans and Sci-fi together had turned chaos into order. He remembered how observing patterns, predicting movements, and thinking creatively had allowed him to turn the tide. And he smiled, knowing that these lessons were just the beginning. Turak joined him on the balcony, watching the distant battlefield. "Humans are remarkable," he said. "Your species finds solutions in ways we cannot predict. It is impressive. Not because you were strongest or fastest, but because you think differently, and thinking differently can change the galaxy." Without it, he would not have survived the arena or the battlefield. Without it, humanity might have been dismissed once more as weak. He realized that greatness was not always forged in moments of glory. Sometimes it was built in quiet, humble acts, in observation, patience, and understanding. The Queen had tested him in every way, physically, mentally, and emotionally, and humanity had passed. Below, the combined forces were cleaning, repairing, and preparing for the next threat. Elias watched them, feeling a sense of deep satisfaction. Humans and Scifi had proven that cooperation, adaptability, and intelligence could overcome raw strength and speed. The galaxy was watching, and humanity had made its mark. Suddenly, a communication device blinked on. It was the Queen. Elias activated it immediately. "Captain Kor," her voice echoed softly but clearly. "You have learned well. The Kryn are but one threat among many. Others will follow, testing your species' ingenuity and courage. Remember this lesson: victory is not given. It is earned through understanding, observation, and the will to persevere. Humanity has proven it can rise to the challenge. Lead wisely, and the galaxy will know the value of your kind. Humans will not just survive, we will thrive. And we will show the galaxy that our strength is in our minds, our courage, and our determination." The galaxy was vast and full of unknown dangers, but he felt no fear, only determination. Humanity had faced its first true challenge among the stars, and it had succeeded. And that success was not due to luck, strength, or alien technology. It was due to human ingenuity, patience, and courage. He remembered the floors he had swept, the drills he had observed, the simulations he had survived. Each had built a foundation for this moment, for the victories to come. He smiled, knowing that the lessons of humility and observation had transformed into leadership and triumph. As the sun rose higher, casting long shadows across the citadel, Elias Kor felt a sense of clarity. The galaxy was no longer a place where humans were weak, insignificant, or dismissed. Humanity had earned a place among the stars, not through domination, but through resilience, intelligence, and the courage to face the unknown. And as he looked at the troops below, humans and Scifi standing side by side, preparing for whatever challenge came next, he realized that the Queen's test had achieved its true purpose. It had revealed the value of humans in the galaxy, not through raw strength, but through the qualities that had always defined them: creativity, courage, adaptability, and determination. Elias Kor had passed the test. Humanity had passed the test, and the galaxy would never forget it. The future was uncertain, and new threats would arise. But Elias smiled, feeling the familiar thrill of challenge and opportunity. Humans would face the galaxy, not as insignificant newcomers, but as a force capable of shaping history, of surviving against all odds, and of proving that the mind and spirit could triumph where strength alone could not. And somewhere deep in the silent halls of the Scifi citadel, the alien queen watched, a faint smile touching her violet eyes. She had chosen well.